American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tellustrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast, brought to you by Coach Paint. I'm Nick Knudsen, and my co-host is Robert Parker. Today is Monday, February 1st, 2021, and we'll cover Robert's travels to the Senior Bowl, or as Rob likes to say, American Football Stories with boots on the ground at the Senior Bowl. Rob, let's start with your week in general and let the folks know what you're up to down in Mobile.
Yeah, Nick, I tell you what, it was an amazing week. Just like you pointed out, boots on the ground for American Football Stories. Everything kind of started off on Tuesday just with practices. Normally you have the one-on-one matchups, the different position skill groups and everything like that. And for those who don't know, you had, NFL coaching staff. So you had the Miami Dolphins coaching one side of the ball, and then you had the Carolina Panthers with Matt Rule coaching another side of the ball. So it all together was just a great week of practice. The weather kind of held up for the most part. It was light showers on Tuesday evening, but for the most part, it was great weather. So I was definitely excited taking the experience and to actually be down in the recent Senior Bowl, given, the pandemic and everything that's kind of plagued the season, the collegiate season, the postseason with the NFL draft and the NFL combine as well. So
and the entire world.
Yeah, and let alone the entire world. Let's not forget that. But once again, amazing experience. I'm definitely got to go back out there, for American Football Stories when, everything kind of gets back to normal, whenever that is, Nick.
Man, I was fired up when you, just for the record, we had talked preseason about going. We were going to do the East-West Shrine Bowl and the Reese's Senior Bowl and the Combine. We want to be heavy in the NFL draft talk, so we want to be at all those things. We want boots on the ground at those events. But with the pandemic, I think, around November, Rob, we talked about it, and we're like, probably not this year. Well, Rob ends up getting a press pass to the Reese's Senior Bowl last week and decides, what the hell, I'm going to book a flight, go down there. So probably not a bad call to get a little good weather in Mobile, because right now you're sitting up there in New Jersey with the blizzard pouring down on your head for the next 12 hours or so, right?
Yeah, it's pretty nasty up here. I tell you what, I do miss that weather down in Mobile. I wish I could go back, but unfortunately, all the flights are pretty much canceled coming into the airports up here in the New Jersey, New York area. So, yeah, that blizzard is definitely nasty out there. But I'm inside. We're talking football. I'm in the warmth of my house. So
good.
It's all good. It's all
good.
Right.
All right. Well, hey, I know you were starting to break it down a little bit for us, but for the folks at home that don't know too much about the Senior Bowl, I want to get kind of specific here. So, how does the schedule work? When does practice start, and how many practice sessions did you attend per day?
Yeah, so you have 2 practice sessions a day. You have a morning practice session with the American team, and then you have the afternoon practice session with the national team. So it's structured pretty much the same way, depending on what coaching staff is actually conducting the practice. Each coach conducted their practice kind of different. So I actually was getting to see how Carolina Panthers and Matt Rule conduct their practice, how Brian Flores and the Miami Dolphins conduct their practice, because you had the Dolphin staff and you had the Carolina Panthers staff. So it was pretty much a normal practice that you'll probably see the Carolina Panthers and the Miami Dolphins construct, in the NFL, but just, with college kids entering the draft. So I thought that was pretty cool.
So what you saw, like the Panthers were Matt Rule and the Panthers were running the American squad, I believe, and Brian Flores and the Dolphins were running the national squad, correct?
Correct.
And I know they used to do the Senior Bowl the East West Triangle game does East West, so I think Senior Bowl used to be North South, but I think they've done away with it for the most part, right? With the American and National. Do you happen to know how they split up the teams? Because I couldn't figure it out. It seems a little random to me.
Yeah, to me, it was pretty random. And just like you mentioned before, normally they do, the north-south, and that's kind of how they construct the teams. But I think this was one of the first years or the second year that they kind of went away with the north-south and kind of did the, American National. So it looked like the rosters was pretty much, picked at random. But it worked out. It worked out.
Right.
It really went smoothly. I have to tip my hats off to Jim Nagy for actually, putting it on in the midst of a pandemic with everything that kind of, just like you said, not only has it shaked the sports landscape dealing with college football and the NFL football, but just the world in general.
Well, so speaking of that pandemic, what were some of the challenges they faced with COVID-19? Did it pretty much run as the NFL teams ran this year with their COVID-19 protocol? You as a press member, were you subjected to testing before entering anywhere?
No, we were not subjected to testing. This year, normally in the with the Reese Senior Bowl, you have open practices for the public. So all the practices were pretty much closed for the general public. If you wasn't, you didn't have, media credentials, or you wasn't an agent or, a scout of an NFL team, then pretty much you were kind of limited to get in. So it was social distancing throughout the week. I know, Saturday was the game. It was not at full capacity, but it was a sold out event. So I think the challenge is more so with the COVID protocol kind of lied in with the game on Saturday more so than, throughout the week.
Well, and some of the interesting parts of this season where we saw some guys opt out of the season that ended up playing the game. So it's the first time we're seeing them play all year. An example that really jumps out is Georgia transfer from Wake Forest, Jamie Newman, a quarterback who had a lot of hype in the preseason, opted out late in the process heading into the season, and then showed up at the Senior Bowl, and he was rocking a Demon Deeks helmet. I didn't see a Georgia Bulldogs helmet on that guy.
Yeah, he didn't have the Georgia Bulldog helmet on, and that was pretty, that was another little small detail that kind of stuck out to me, and I was just like, oh, okay, well, normally you had some guys that actually transferred. For example, Tony Fields, the linebacker originally out of Arizona that transferred to West Virginia, he kind of had the dual helmet where he kind of was showing love and support to both schools. But with Jamie Newman, he was definitely rocking the Wake Forest Demon Deacons helmet.
Yeah, I thought this was the game where they could slap all the logos on their helmets, get as many logos as you want. So talk about who is attending these practices during the week. Because, I mean, and you talk about the fans being open, and there's obviously a fan element around there. But I'm talking about inside the game. Like, what's the type of environments in the hotels and the happy hours, and, like, what type of meetings are going on during a week like this?
Yeah, normally everything will kind of be full open, but this year, of course, with the pandemic, a little things were more so close knit. They really didn't have the meet and greet with the fans and the players, the interaction with the players. They didn't have the parade that they would normally have. So a lot of things that would normally be on the table, Nick, dealing with the Senior Bowl, was kind of off the table because of the pandemic. It was actually pretty quiet. I kind of stayed in the university area. So my motel was pretty quiet. I actually had, family and friends flying in later in the week to kind of actually go to the game because once again, like I stated before, the practices was closed to the general public.
Right.
So it was a good job all the way around. I think Jim Nagy pulled this one off. And it really shine a spotlight on, giving these guys an extra opportunity in front of scouts and in front of, NFL teams and in front of fans. So I thought this was a pretty cool week of the Senior Bowl and the game shaped up.
in general, big picture, you got scouts there talking to, you got agents talking to teams and stuff behind the scenes. Similar, maybe a similar scene, obviously very similar to what you'd see at the East West Shrine Bowl, but maybe similar almost to what you see at the combine too, right? Similar type of environment that you'd see on a social setting in Indianapolis when you're there in the evenings for the combine.
Yeah, I think you saw a little bit more the social setting and the interaction with regards to agents and teams, scouts and teams, scouts and players, teams and players, because it's going forward. It's not going to be an NFL draft. So I thought teams actually came down and took a full advantage of having this opportunity to kind of
Right.
be in front of these athletes, and the athletes took advantage of being in front of these teams as well. I know one player that stuck out in my mind was Devontae Smith. He didn't play or practice all week, but he actually came down to kind of get those one-on-ones with, the coaching staffs, or get those one-on-ones with the front office personnel from different team to team, and knowing that the Miami Dolphins have the number 3 pick. So that was kind of smart on his move, if you ask me, Nick.
For sure. He's definitely in contention there to hook up with Tua down in Miami. I guess I was just trying to get you to set the page a little bit for the type of environment there with all the a lot of agents floating around, a lot of teams with scouts down there, and especially this year. You're right, with no combine in Indianapolis, where a lot of people get that up close and personal measurements and all these guys. It's not going to happen this year. So the combine's canceled in person. So this was definitely a lot more important. So we obviously saw, we know Dan Shanka very well. He runs the East West Shrine game. He does a phenomenal job recruiting that game, and they didn't even get a play this year in the game. So they did a virtual event. So it was good that there was at least some event for an NFL teams to kind of get on the ground and actually interact with the guys. Let's go to the game itself. We're not gonna spend too much time on the game itself. We're gonna more break down the players, but the game was actually semi-entertaining. I mean, you can't really talk much about defense in these games. It's just there's no real major hitting or anything. This is normally not a game that most fans are thoroughly interested in watching. It's more interesting watching to see how the guys perform throughout the week. So we'll spend more of our time on that. But for the game itself, the score ended up being 27-24 National over the American. That's Brian Flores' team over Matt Rule's squad. But the American fought back from a 13-0 lead at the half to take a 16-13 lead with just under 5 minutes left in the third quarter. The National, led by Brian Flores, the Miami Dolphins, ended up responding with 2 TDs on 2 of their final 3 possessions to lock in a 3-point win. But Rob, we'll talk about game highlights from players when we get there. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball, though, first. And I want to go through the quarterbacks. You had 6 quarterbacks here at the game. Jamie Newman, Wake Forest and Georgia. First time seeing him play all year. Mac Jones from Alabama. We did not see him play in the game, but he practiced all week. Ended up having an ankle issue, I believe. Kellen Mond out of Texas A&M, who ended up being the MVP of the game. Felipe Franks out of Arkansas, Sam Ellinger out of Texas, and Ian Book out of Notre Dame. I know we like to keep it positive on this show, Rob, but Ian Book always frustrated me watching him play quarterback. I know he could scramble around. He's a good college quarterback, but I thought he got a lot of extra hype being at Notre Dame. And quite frankly, he frustrated me watching him on Saturday as well. How did he look in practice to you this week?
He actually looked pretty good in practice, Nick. I tell you what, one thing that kind of stood out for me with Ian Book was his actual size. I got the chance to see him up close and personal, and you see these guys on television and they have their pads on, and you're just like, okay, you're reading their height and weight measurements, but for some reason it seems like they're always bigger than what they look. I mean, unless it's Tyreek Cohen or one of those guys, or Tyreek Hill. But for example, I just thought Ian Book was bigger. Just seeing him play on TV, but he was actually on the short side to me. And just like you said, he's more so of a dual threat quarterback than a pocket passer. And I think that was one thing that he put on display this past week at the Senior Bowl.
Do you like his NFL capabilities? I'm not sold on him as an NFL prospect.
Yeah, I tell you what, he showed flashes all week that he could make the necessary throws, the accurate throws, and he is one of those quarterbacks who's short in stature, so he do kind of fit the Baker Mayfield, the Kyler Murray, the Russell Wilson mold, Drew Brees in regards to size. But all of those guys, they do something exceptionally well, and it's that they throw the ball pretty well, and that's the thing that Ian Book has to improve if he wants to make that transition on the next level to kind of stick with the team.
Ellinger did not put up great numbers, but he did lead a touchdown drive. He had a touchdown pass, and he had a couple good throws. But again, Ellinger, not crazy about him at the next level either. I think he's a good prospect, but I'm not nothing more than a late round flyer on the guy. I can't see him going much higher than that. You saw Felipe Franks. He kind of is who he is. You see him dance around a little bit when he gets in trouble. Maybe holds the ball too long at times, but with his size and his arm, accurate or not, he's going to get a shot to be a backup quarterback at least. I think he'll start NFL games at some point when some team needs him at some point, but not right away. But I think he's going to have, of this group of quarterbacks, even with Kellen Mond, even with Jamie Newman, I think Felipe Franks ends up having the longest NFL career of this group. Am I crazy to think that?
I don't think you're crazy for saying that. And the reason why I say this, Nick, is that just like you mentioned out, he has the size. And one thing that he has going for him is that we saw the development of Josh Allen from last year to this year. And they kind of have the same type mind body build sets as far as height and weight. And also, Felipe Franks can tuck it and run. If you ask me personally, I would like to see him tuck it and run a little bit more to kind of keep the defense a little bit honest. But one thing that Felipe has to work on is actually those touch throws. We know he has a big arm. He can stretch the defense. He can throw the ball downfield. But going across the middle, those slants, those and dig routes, those posts, he has to put touch, and that's one thing I haven't seen him do all week long. And he's going to have to get that on the next level if he wants to stick around in the NFL.
Yeah, and if you would have talked about the Florida Gators 3 years ago, you would have said the exact same thing about him, right?
Yeah, the exact same thing.
It's not, again, at some point you are who you are at some point, and that's not a knock on Felipe. We all have our weaknesses in life, but I'll tell you, I'm gonna give you one of the things we're gonna do with each segment. Everyone's eligible to. I love Daniel Jeremiah's stuff. He called the game on Saturday too. I know he was down there all week, and I grabbed his top 10 list of guys that impressed him this week. So I'm gonna read off Daniel Jeremiah piece to you, and you react to it. All right. So one of his top 10 players, the only quarterback he selected was Mac Jones of Alabama, the national championship, and this is directly from Daniel Jeremiah on NFL.com. The national championship winning quarterback was consistent and steady in practices, just like he was in the season. There's no individual trait that wows you, but he's a good decision maker with accuracy and touch, especially underneath and at the intermediate levels. He'll leave Mobile having shown that he was the best passer of the Senior Bowl QBs. That doesn't surprise me too much to hear that, because again, we're not totally wowed with this group, right? So it doesn't shock me a whole lot based on what we saw from him this year. It's impressive that he came here to compete after wrapping up his season just a couple weeks ago, and I still have him rated on the borderline of the first round. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see him in the game on Saturday. Okay, this was obviously before, but he hurt his left ankle in practice. He's not 100%. He did not play in that game on Saturday. But most accurate of the Senior Bowl QBs, that doesn't surprise me, because I don't think this group is fantastic. I would have thought Jamie Newman could have given him a run for the money on that, but we didn't see that from him in his performance. But I will say this: you talk about him coming a couple weeks after Bama's national championship and playoff run. Rob, what were your insights from Mac Jones, from directly from Mac Jones, about him coming here just after the playoffs?
Yeah, I actually got a chance to, take part in one of the Mac Jones interview after practices, and he actually came out and stated, he was burnt out, with the season, with everything that was dealing with that was coming down with the pandemic and COVID, winning the national championship, being banged up, kind of nicked up all year long, and he actually coming out there to kind of compete. He really didn't have to. I mean, for example, I think him and Najee Harris actually came out there to compete, and they really didn't have to. I know Najee Harris, a big article came out that he kind of went against his agent well wishes of actually going out there and practice. Jim Nagy just really wanted him to come out there to kind of interview with the teams to get the early jump on the draft process because there's no combine. But Najee Harris said, you know what, I want to compete. I want to show these guys, I'm here to compete. I might not play in the game, but I want to go through the practices and I want to do the drills. And that's what him and Mac Jones did. Even if they didn't play in the game, I think they, upped their stock without even playing in the game because they had a good week of practice. And Mac Jones was definitely one of the most accurate passers, out of this group of quarterbacks. And I tell you what, moving forward, Nick, like I always say this, it's really not a passing lead, it's a completion lead. So Mac Jones is so accurate with the ball, and I really think he's going to stick with the team. If he gets put in the right situation with weapons around him, I do feel like he's going to thrive because he was the most accurate quarterback out of the bunch.
What teams do you like? I'm putting you on the spot here. We didn't prep this. But off the top of your head, because I know Detroit was talked about before they made a move with Jared Goff, and maybe they still draft a quarterback in Detroit, maybe sit him for a couple years, but who do you like? What's a good fit for Mac Jones at the next level? Give me 2 to 3 teams.
Well, one of the hot topics in regards to what teams were actually interested in Mac Jones down there, one of those teams was the New England Patriots. So we know their quarterback situation with Cam Newton. We don't know if they're going to bring him back or whatever the case may be, but they do need to find that franchise quarterback moving forward. So Mac Jones and the New England Patriots was definitely, one of the topics floating around down at the Senior Bowl.
Ooh.
And I tell you what, I know we kind of have to wait to see what happens with Deshaun Watson to see where the dominoes may fall. And then at the end of the day, I know Aaron Rodgers, I'm reading reports that he might be potentially out of Green Bay. I know they got Jordan Love stepping in, but if you trade Aaron Rodgers or Aaron Rodgers somehow leaves Green Bay, you might have to draft another quarterback. So I was kind of hearing Mac Jones' name around Green Bay as well. So those are the top 2 teams where I was seeing him fit and just hearing reports swirling around his name.
Well, as hard as it is for me not to follow up on the Green Bay rumors, I'll be disciplined and move forward here. But the thing that's also strikes me about this Senior Bowl group is, are they basically competing for maybe the 5th or 6th best quarterback in the draft with this group? Because one notable name that was absent that I thought he was originally invited to this game, but it was Kyle Trask from Florida. I essentially, you got Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, and Kyle Trask all in the mix to all potentially be first-round picks. And I'm not sure any of this group, maybe outside of Mac Jones, warrants first-round consideration.
Yeah, I don't think you're off base with that one. I think Mac Jones, he came down here, he competed, saying all the right things, that he was initially burnt out with the season and everything, but he wanted to come down and compete and practice. He didn't play in the game, just like I mentioned earlier, but I think he showed enough to kind of separate himself from all the quarterbacks in this group. So just like you said, if anyone's, warranted first round consideration to get drafted, is Mac Jones. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be teams that just look at what he did and his film and him just being an accurate thrower. So I think he's the only one out of this group that will be, a potential first round draft pick.
I loved Jamie Newman in 2019 at Wake Forest. And when he transferred to Georgia, I thought that was going to be some good stuff. I mean, I wasn't totally sold. Everyone's like, Heisman, national title for Georgia. Georgia's the king of preseason hype, but I wasn't on that level with it. But I thought it could be pretty interesting. I thought him in Georgia would have been very interesting this year. Obviously, the opt-out happens at the last minute. I don't know if it was because there's a debacle behind the scene in the way they handle their quarterbacks in Athens and he got angry and left or whatever. I'm totally speculating on that for the record, but I'm just trying to apply common sense. He says it was because of his family, but the timing of that, it's something smells funny on that to me. But anyway, so long story short, he doesn't play the 2020 season. Looked a little rusty to me for sure, but what'd you think about Jamie Newman in practice, Rob?
Yeah, you asked about Jamie Newman, Nick, how he looked in practice and how he looked in the game for the most part for the full week. I tell you what, he kind of looked like he didn't play for a full year. It kind of looked like he opted out. He just didn't have the quick instincts and the clock in his head that you would want a quarterback to kind of have. And he is a dual threat guy where he can tuck and run, but it really just seemed like he didn't have that that pocket awareness in his head because he didn't really play against live competition pretty much all year. So I think he came into this game in practice in a disadvantage because all the other quarterbacks in this group actually played, and he was the only one that opted out. So he showed flashes here and there, but as far as putting something tangible and consistent together all week long, he just didn't do it.
Well, one of the beneficiaries, you would have thought Newman, one of the reasons we can say with some certainty he didn't look awesome during the game at times. He did go 10 for 14, but it's just a little rusty. We saw an interception from him too in the game. Kellen Mond started a little slow, but he got some rhythm. And Daniel Jeremiah actually mentioned that during the game. That's one of the benefits with the American rosters that there's only two quarterbacks, so that they got a lot more playing time. Mond ends up winning the MVP. I think Mond is a solid quarterback. You hear nothing but good things about him from the A&M people, about what a student of the game he is. Him and Jimbo had an awesome relationship. Yeah, the proof was on the field this year. We saw a lot of good performances out of Kellen Mond. But were you ever? I was never scared. Even when the Gators played them, they killed Texas A&M, killed Florida on the ground. Kellen Mond had a nice game, had a couple big throws deep, but everyone burned the Florida secondary deep this year. That wasn't really unique. Kellen Mond, obviously a key piece to that team this year, but it wasn't like a Kyle Trask for Florida type of good or a Mac Jones for Alabama. It wasn't that type of importance on that team, I feel. And I feel like Texas A&M's just got a strong roster, and they'll be right back in it next year. And it's no disrespect to Kellen Mond. It's just I don't see him being much more than a backup in this league. I'm not sure he's going to be a starter at any point, even though he wins the MVP of this game. What do you think, Rob? What did you see from him this week?
Yeah, I'm right there with you in regards to his transition on the next level. The same way that you talked about Felipe Franks early, as far as he's going to get opportunities to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, but is he going to put a 10 to 15 year run together at the starting quarterback position? I don't think so. I think he's going to be a backup. I think he might, have to work his way up from third string. But throughout the week in practice and throughout the game, he did show flashes of him being a capable quarterback, throwing the ball with accuracy, tucking it and running, making quick instincts, checking it down, going over top and giving his receivers a chance to make a play on the ball. So he did show everything that you want to see in a quarterback this week during the Senior Bowl and in the game. But just like you said, moving forward, I think he's going to have to, speed up his progression, because in the NFL, the game is just a little bit faster, and that sometimes it seems like he plays a little bit slower, or it's kind of hard to digest the formations. I actually seen him kind of, go back and forth with the receiver. I don't know if it was, Mung's fault or if it was the receiver's fault, because they kind of got mismatched up in the routes, at practice. So he was actually going over and taking the time to say, hey, maybe it was my fault, but, let me just get back on the same page with you. So you see that leadership, you see that want and that willingness to be coached. So I think he could have a successful career on the next level, but being a consistent starter for a team, I don't see that, at least for right now.
Who do you think? We try to avoid hot takey stuff on this podcast, but you can't help it with draft stock a little bit, right? I'm going to indulge a little bit. Who helped their draft stock the most out of this group of quarterbacks, and who has some work to do after leaving Mobile still? Like who basically almost, I don't know if anyone hurt their stock, but we'll say who helped their stock the most and who has the most work to do going forward in the draft process.
I mean, just per our conversation earlier, talking about Mac Jones kind of being the number one out of all these quarterbacks, and probably is going to get first round consideration to get drafted. I think you take Mac Jones out of the equation, and one of the quarterbacks that we just got finished talking about that kind of helped his draft stock is Kellen Mond.
Mhm.
He did put a good game together at the Senior Bowl. He won the MVP, and he showed flashes throughout the week as him being a capable quarterback. And then on the flip side of that, I tell you, two quarterbacks that really have to, work on their game and have a good pro day or whatever the case may be is going to be Sam Ellinger and Ian Book. I think, those two guys need to kind of, get back in the lab and kind of work on, getting in tune with the NFL game and getting in tune with the speed of the game and kind of, picking up their progressions. And Jamie Newman, but I think that'll come back to Jamie Newman because he did opt it out for the season. So I think with more reps and more actually live action, he could kind of get that a little bit sooner. But just seeing Sam Ellinger and Ian Book out here all week long and at the game, I think those two guys kind of need to kind of work on their game moving forward.
Yeah, they're definitely stretch prospects for the next level. I definitely think that. All right, let's move over to the running backs. So in the American, you had Chris Evans, Elijah Mitch from Michigan, Elijah Mitchell from Louisiana, Kylan Hill from Mississippi State, Larry Roundtree from Missouri. And on the national team, you have Michael Carter from North Carolina, Trey Sermon, Ohio State, Najee Harris, Alabama, Khalil Herbert, Virginia Tech, Kansas transfer, and Ramondre Stevenson from Oklahoma. Superstar out of this group was Michael Carter, and that's exactly who Daniel Jeremiah called out. He said, every now and then there's a player who just pops off the screen when I sit down. Again, this is Daniel Jeremiah, NFL.com. Every now and then there's a player who just pops off the screen when I sit down to watch tape, and Carter was that guy this year. He showed burst and an ability to make plays out of the backfield as a receiver. I think he has a legitimate shot to be a day 2, round 2 to 3 pick in an era where running backs are being devalued. He has a unique skill set, and then he goes on to compare him to Nyheim Hines on the Indianapolis Colts. And we certainly saw some games where Hines got going this year for the Colts. Man, Carter, he does have that burst. He definitely showed it off in the game as well. He had 8 carries for 60 yards with a long of 27. It was probably the biggest highlight of the game. There wasn't too many huge plays, especially in the ground game. This was obviously a game we didn't see Chris Evans play. We didn't see Trey Sermon play. He's dealing with the injury from the national championship game. And as you said earlier, Najee Harris recommended by his agent to not play. So you basically had 3 running backs on each team, and the other 2 running backs on each team, they didn't do a whole lot. We saw 7 yards on 4 carries from Larry Roundtree, 2 yards on 4 carries from Elijah Mitchell, both excellent running backs, by the way. Kylan Hill leads the way with 6 carries for 15 yards. I mean, the all-star games, let's face it, they're not great for the running game ever, pretty much. Ramondre Stevenson, 7 carries, 9 yards. Khalil Herbert, 6 carries for 3 yards. Quick week of practice, not a lot of time to gel up front. Sloppy football in general. It's not a great recipe for a great running game. So you take it with a grain of salt. So Michael Carter is the obvious answer, Rob, of who stood out. Who else stood out is my question. Which of these guys, even though the numbers aren't great for the game on Saturday, which of these guys popped in practice this week to you?
I tell you what, Khalil Herbert, the running back from Virginia Tech. I know, the numbers, just like you said, Nick, don't show what these guys did the whole week because of, the All-Star games not being conducive to the ground game. Just the sloppy play up front with the O-line. It really seems like the defense always have an advantage in these games, if you ask me. But just going to practice, Khalil Herbert, he definitely broke out some nice runs in practice. He definitely showed that he has the juice to kind of, take the distance, and also that jump cut where he can hit the hole and, bounce to the outside and have a stiff arm ready for the defender. So I think Khalil Herbert stood out for me, for the week of practice.
Now, I didn't see a lot from Ramondre Stevenson in the game, but what did you think of his week at practice? He was someone at Oklahoma that he had a nice season this year. He ended up gaining 665 yards on the ground on 101 carries. But I mean, this is a guy. He's by no means a back that is going to be a workhorse for you. What type of back does Ramondre Stevenson project to in the next level out of Oklahoma?
Yeah, I think he could be that, that ground and pound guy. He's a pretty big guy. He's 6'1", 6', 6'1", close to 250. So, but he doesn't have that burst that you see in those bigger backs like a Derrick Henry. So he's definitely going to be that, that short down and distance guy that you kind of bring in at the goal line, or you bring in when it's 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1 to kind of get that yardage and just fall forward. But he did see like he had some nice feet, going through the running back positional drills. He did show quick feet, just kind of that jump cut. And he actually, he runs behind his pads. So, and he shows that contact balance. I know he showed it in practice, but once again, he's one of those bigger backs that's probably, not going to be the star running back of the team, but it's probably going to be, a backup or a third screen to kind of come in and kind of, give the starter a breath of fresh air.
Two top SEC backs, Colin Hill and Larry Roundtree. They didn't get to show a lot what they did in the game, but Roundtree was a steady force for the Missouri offense the last several years, really his entire career. I mean, he had 126 carries as a freshman. So he had over 200 attempts the last 2 years. That's the type of things you like to see. I mean, on the one hand, you could say the guy maybe got a little beat up with that many carries, but on the other hand, he averaged 4.4, 6.4, or 5.4, and then 6.7 yards per carry over the last couple of years. The guy knows how to gain some serious yardage. 5'10", 210 out of North Carolina, Larry Roundtree. Colin Hill, explosive back. We only saw him get 15 carries, but he only played a few games this year. Highlight of the season was the Mississippi State game, the Mississippi State LSU game, like most of the Mississippi State team. But this was a guy that rushed for over 1,300 yards, over 200 carries last year, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield too. He can be a productive receiver. He showed at times this year, catching a career high 23 passes in those few games that he played. So, projecting next level, Larry Roundtree, more of a true running back. Colin Hill, that type of weapon back that. I mean, God forbid if Andy Reid gets his hands on a guy like that.
Yeah, you're right. You're spot on in regards to Larry Roundtree. And not only did he put up those numbers, he did it in the SEC. The SEC is the number one conference out there. I can care less what everyone else say. It's all SEC. And I don't want to hear about, oh, well, it's top heavy because it's only a couple teams that actually can compete for a national championship. It really doesn't matter. Just the type of levels of the players that you have in the SEC doesn't matter. I mean, for example, look at that Tennessee roster last year. I mean, you actually had a Tennessee guy out here and Josh Palmer who actually did well all week and actually had an exceptional Senior Bowl game. And then you see the transfer portal that, Eric Gray is going to Oklahoma. So that Tennessee roster was very, very talented. I know it didn't produce and result in wins, but that was, for me, I think that was main so because of the quarterback play and coaching. But, I don't care if, Alabama wins every single year. It's still talent in the SEC, and that proves year in and year out because of the draft. And we saw that LSU team the year before put, double-digit players in the draft. So when it comes to SEC players, they're definitely working on a different level than the nation. So I really have faith in Larry Roundtree and Colin Hill making that transition on the next level just because they played in a tougher conference. And just like you said, Larry Roundtree is more of that traditional running back, and Colin Hill is that weapon that you can use to run between the tackles, but also line up at receiver and kind of, find the defense in the mismatch and kind of give them some reps on the outside in the receiving game. So I think these two running backs will transition well on the next level. One thing that really surprised me is Demetric Felton, the running back from UCLA. He didn't work out at running back this week. He actually worked out at the receiver position. So I see that transition from running back to slot receiver for Demetric Felton, and he actually had a decent practice and a good game as well.
Rob's getting excited, man. He's getting a position group ahead of me, man. He's out there. He's got all the scouting reports ready to go, aren't you, dude? You got him. We got our last running back I want to talk about. Elijah Mitchell out of Louisiana. You wonder why Billy Napier's being mentioned for jobs. Billy Napier out of the Louisiana Raging Cajuns head coach. He had two running backs in Elijah Mitchell and East West Shrine Bowl selection, Trey Ragas. The last couple years, these guys are each, with over 130 attempts each and just chewing people up. Mitchell has averaged he almost had all 4 seasons averaging over 6 yards a carry. He was at 5.8 his junior year, but he did get 16 touchdowns and 1,100 yards in the year that he managed to rush for under 6 yards a carry. So there's some serious talent coming through that program with Billy Napier. But Elijah Mitchell, we didn't get to see a whole lot from him in the game. Did you like what you saw from him in practice?
Yeah. Once again, he has those yards for a reason. Anytime you see a player that's producing on the field and just garnering his yardage, especially at the running back position, you kind of have to kind of keep a little bit eye on him because this is a moving forward. The NFL is a running back lead by committee. I mean that's kind of the way it's going. I mean I know you have the Alvin Kamara's, the Dalvin Cooks, the Christian McCaffreys, but once again those guys are better when they can kind of get a couple of plays off on the sideline to kind of spell them and then kind of get back in the game. And I think that's what you're going to see with Elijah Mitchell. He's very capable of actually, running the ball on the next level between the tackles on the outside. And I'm very excited to see him make that transition because he definitely had a decent week of practice.
Yeah. And so of this group, I think we're probably in agreement. Trey Sermon and Najee Harris go off the board before Michael Carter, but Michael Carter certainly did a lot for his draft stock this week, didn't he?
He really did. And I tell you what, just being in that backfield all year long with Javonte Williams, another running back that,
He'll get drafted.
He's definitely going to get drafted. So now I think, Michael Carter kind of up this stock moving forward. If he has a decent pro day with the week that he had in practice, the game that he had in the Senior Bowl, and the season that he had, and you put all that together, I tell you what, I really think he's a day 2 running back, and whoever drafts him is going to get a steal. And I tell you what, he's going to be a guy that is going to help you out in the passing game, and he's going to help you out in the running game. And moving forward, this is kind of what that new element and that new offense style in the NFL is going to, those running backs that can do both. So, and I really think Michael Carter can do both at a high level. So I'm really excited to see him get drafted, and I project him to get drafted on day 2.
All right, receivers, big group. We'll split it up. We'll talk team by team. Let's start with the American roster. You had Kadarius Toney, Amari Rodgers, Marquez Stevenson out of Houston. Sorry, Rodgers out of Clemson, Kadarius Toney out of Florida. Marquez Stevenson out of Houston, Austin Watkins Jr. out of UAB, Trevon Grimes out of Florida, Shi Smith out of South Carolina. I call him not so Shi Smith. Cornell Powell out of Clemson. You have Racy McMath out of LSU and Josh Palmer out of Tennessee. Now, Rob, the ones I want to highlight, Amari Rodgers ends up leading the game with 4 receptions. He ends up having a touchdown. Great career at Clemson. Didn't know he was T. Martin's son, though. That's not really a scouting report on him. Just thought that was an interesting fact I learned this week. T. Martin, the last Tennessee quarterback to win a national title. In 1998 there down in Knoxville. But Cooper, explosive out of the slot. Certainly the type of receiver that maybe 10 years ago, you don't see that body type as much in the NFL. But now you're seeing more and more guys that look like Amari Rodgers.
Yeah, you really are. And I tell you what, he's not the biggest guy, but he is compact and he is built well.
Yeah. Strong, for sure.
He is really solid. I thought, just seeing him on TV and just seeing him on film, I just thought he was one of those, slot receivers, kind of like along the lines of, Hunter Renfrow that we saw come out of Clemson a couple years ago. But at the end of the day, it's just like he actually can run every route like a Hunter Renfrow, but he's just more athletic and he's just built better. So I think his body is going to hang up really well in the NFL on the next level. And he actually can run every route on the route tree. And he showed that in practice this past week.
Kadarius Toney had a great week at practice, was voted receiver of the week by, I believe they let the defensive backs and linebackers select that award for the different position groups. The people that cover them get a vote on them. So Kadarius Toney wins wide receiver of the week and ends up not playing. I understand the move though. I mean, if that guy, if he gets twisted the wrong way or something in a game, why play? Everything's on tape. We know who you are, Kadarius Toney. I understand the move, but Rob, you got to interview him too, right? In the press conference. Would you think of Kadarius Toney this week?
Yeah, I tell you what, Mike Renner said it the best from Pro Football Focus. He tweeted out something, and it stated, "You can't teach what Kadarius Toney has,"
Nope.
and he showed that all week. When you talk about that slot receiver on the next level, the Cole Beasleys, I know Nelson Aguilar actually plays in the slot, but he can play on the outside. I can kind of see Kadarius Toney doing the same thing because the way that he stacks the corner, at the line of scrimmage, he can get past anyone on a go route, but he can also work the middle of the field on those whip routes, those jerk routes, those post routes, those end cuts. His route tree has really developed over the last year. It proved in practice he was unguardable. The only thing that he has to work on, maybe stay on the jug machine a little bit longer because he did have some concentration drops that can be cleaned up if he continues to focus and practice on it. But once again, like he's getting 10 yards, 15 yards behind the defense, at will. So I think Kadarius Toney did boosted his draft stock so much this past week with practice at the Senior Bowl, even though he didn't play in the actual game.
I think he boosted it in 2020 in general, but this week at the Senior Bowl just followed up what we've seen all year out of him. This is a guy, picture that guy of your favorite program that everyone was fired up about 3 years ago, but either injuries or whatever just holds him back. And then you get to see him his final year develop into what you think he's capable of and then some, and then really kind of turn into a solid leader on top of that. This was a guy that you really got to watch grow from that freshman season until his senior year. It was fun to watch him grow into that leadership role his final year. Absolute warrior too. But Rob, you're going to punch anyone in the face if they keep comparing him to Tyreek Hill, even though I'm guilty of making that same comparison, aren't you?
Yeah, and the reason for that one, Nick, is just I just don't see it. Tyreek Hill, I think a fair comparison to Tyreek Hill will be kind of Rondale Moore, because if you look at Rondale's more size and stature, he's definitely a little bit shorter than Kadarius Toney, but his lower body is really kind of ripped up. Kadarius Toney just looks like an athlete. He's not the biggest. He's not the bulkiest. He just looks like, an athlete, someone who's just fit to play any position. And in the interview that we actually had, he said, you know what? I am an athlete. I can play cornerback. I actually got recruited to play quarterback.
Yeah, he did. That's a true story.
He can play defensive back. He can play safety. So he's just one of those athletes that you can kind of put on the field no matter what position, and he's going to succeed. But at the receiver spot, I really think he made that jump this year. You were right. And I think that jump was because of Kyle Pitts and Kyle Trask. He actually had a quarterback that could get him the ball, and we saw that this year from Kyle Trask. So my hat's off to Kadarius Toney for making that great of an improvement, that great of a jump to get drafted. And I expect him to have a good pro day if he decides to go out there and run the 40, or if he goes out there and, do the vertical jump and the bench press. And not only is he shifty, I know he has the moniker out there, Nick, as being called a human joystick, but he is physical at the point of attack. He will run you over. And I'm not talking about just DBs or safeties. I'm talking about linebackers as well. He is really, really physical. And he actually emphasized that. He said, hey, I can run past you or I can run through you. And that's what you like to see coming from a receiver, one of those smaller slot guys who actually have that physical nature and that competitiveness about him.
And if you don't believe what Robert's saying, go look at Kadarius Toney's touchdown run against Missouri, where he basically presses the B button and he completely stopped on a dime, complete 360 spin out of the tackle of all SEC linebacker Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton out of Missouri, linebacker, total freaking stud, going to be a great player in the NFL. Kadarius Toney made him look foolish for one play though, and ended up in the end zone. All right, we got to move on. Last question because I didn't follow up on it. Kyle Trask, why didn't he play this week? Do we know?
Yeah, I have no clue. I was actually
I should have looked that up. But I didn't. So if you don't know, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no clue. That was surprising to me when I
know he got invited
out there. Yeah, he did. He did get invited, and I was kind of surprised to see him not out there. So I don't know if it was injuries or maybe his agent say, hey, I don't think it's in your best to kind of go down there. So whatever it was, I don't know. We have to definitely follow up on that story though, Nick.
I would think that he would have been the top quarterback in that group. I like Trask over Mac Jones at the next level. I think he would have been the top, but maybe that's why. Maybe they feel like that and he didn't have to go out and prove anything. All right. I want to highlight two more receivers on this American roster here. Josh Palmer, big physical guy. Hey, the Extra Point, the podcast you're a part of, is with Roland Rainey. Got an interview with Josh Palmer, Tennessee. What'd you think of that interview?
Yeah, I thought that interview went well with Roland Rainey, the host of the Extra Point podcast with ESPN Denver 1600, which I'm also a part of. And I tell you what, Josh Palmer looks the part. So when you see someone up close and you say, for example, when I saw Ian Book and I was just like, wow, I thought Ian Book would be a little bit bigger, especially, height wise, but Josh Palmer actually looks the part. It really looks like he can go onto an NFL field right now and compete and play with, the NFL DBs and the NFL linebackers, because he is a big physical receiver that can also run route trees, who actually had a decent practice all week long. He was getting behind the defense on go routes. He was running, timing routes with the slants or in the outs, and he was actually looking good. But that goes to show you, when you have a quarterback and, you have the talent that you need at your particular position, you can be successful. And that's what Josh Palmer proved this week. He really didn't have that at Tennessee, if you really look at that quarterback position at Tennessee.
Yeah, he's definitely going to likely find himself in a better situation at the next level. I'll say it that way, to be kind. ESPN 1600 Denver, Roland Rainey, the Extra Point. Check it out. That interview with Josh Palmer. It's on YouTube, though. Make sure to search that on YouTube. Shi Smith, Nacho Shi Smith, South Carolina. Hey, this is a guy who I liked a lot during the season. Talks as much as he drops the ball, though. He's got to chill out on dropping the ball a little bit, but he did, when he does catch the ball and haul it in, he can make some big plays. He can be explosive. I can see him being a steal in the 5th round or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. And that's pretty funny that you said Shi Smith, not so shy. I love that one. And you're right. He's definitely, everything that you expect in a receiver as being like, a diva, the one that's going to be competitive and wants the ball. That's Shi Smith. And he proved that this past week at the Senior Bowl. And just, you're right in regards to the drops. He has some concentration drops that he can clean up, but overall, I think he is a solid receiver, and I think he is going to do well on the next level. He's going to be that slot receiver that not only can, work the middle of the field, but actually, go over the top of the defense. And just like you said, once he catch the ball, he can actually pick up some yak yards as well. Tough guy coming out of South Carolina, and he actually got creamed in the Senior Bowl. I can't recall what defensive back actually had a clear shot because the ball was overthrown, but he definitely got creamed and nailed. But he is a tough receiver that's going to transition well in the NFL.
I would love him as a draft pick late. If my team needed, like if my team were definitely at least 2 deep, he's not going to be more than a number 3 his rookie year. I definitely would like to see him. If he were like my 4th or 5th on the depth chart, I'd be pretty thrilled. Like
I tell you what, I think if the Seattle Seahawks can draft him,
good example.
In the later round, I think that will be a great fit with him and Freddie Swain on the inside, and kind of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside. I think that will be a formidable receiver group, because I really think Shi Smith brings a lot to the table.
He would be great in a situation like that. Yeah, definitely. Devontae Smith, let's go to the national team. Devontae Smith, Dwayne Eskridge out of Western Michigan, Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State, Nico Collins, big fella out of Michigan, Demetric Felton, you talked about on UCLA, Des Fitzpatrick, Louisville, Sage Surratt out of Wake Forest, Ben, help me with this last name, Skowronik.
You got it.
I always struggle with it. I can't I can say it in my head, but not out loud. Sorry. I definitely know the player. Just struggle with the name. Apologies, folks. Cade Johnson, much easier to say, out of South Dakota State, and Frank Darby out of Arizona State. Man, Frank Darby, I'm just going to say, first off, let's go to Felton. You mentioned him already. I'm just going to read what Daniel Jeremiah had to say in his NFL.com article. He actually picked out two guys off of this team, off the national team. He said Demetric Felton, he's very impressed with running back and wide receiver from UCLA. Played running back last season for the Bruins, but primarily lined up at receiver in the Senior Bowl, although he did get a little work at running back too. He has some dynamic qualities. UCLA coach Chip Kelly told me Felton practiced at both running back and receiver throughout the 2020 season. That familiarity with each position showed him mobile. He's an explosive player, the exact type of hybrid you like to see headed into the league. Rob, you talked about him already, so I'm not going to make you repeat yourself. Cade Johnson, South Dakota State. Johnson did not play this fall because of Missouri Valley Conference, FCS, postponed his football season until the spring, but he showed no signs of rust during practice. He consistently won in one-on-one drills, flashing his impressive quickness. If your NFL team needs a good slot receiver, Johnson is a player to keep an eye on. And for those of you who are skeptical about FCS receivers, I think a fellow by the name of Cooper Kupp in LA is doing okay for the Rams there, Rob.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, so that's a guy who comes out of Eastern Washington, and I believe he even played a little quarterback at the college level. Smith, as you said, practiced during the week. Didn't see much from the game. Didn't hear much about Tylan Wallace at all out of Oklahoma State. What do you think about his practice time?
Actually, for me, he jumped out in practice. He was one of those receivers who won his one-on-one matchups. He got behind the defense. He was actually competing. He was getting into it with, the DBs and the one-on-one drills and the 7-on-7. He's a very scrappy player. I think, he actually fits that Cooper Kupp mold as well. I think he can be a slot receiver on that next level who can kind of, catch the screen passes and kind of, pick up the extra yak yards, but he also has that track speed where he can kind of take it over the top of the defense. So I think Tylan Wallace is going to fare well, on the next level. And I can kind of see him going into the third, fourth, and the fifth round, high as the third, and dropping low as the fifth round. But whatever team gets him, I can see him making an immediate impact, whether it's, on special teams, on kickoff or punt return. I really think, he can fit well with any team because he is a technician at the route runner position. He actually has, decent hands. Probably one of the better hands I saw at the Senior Bowl practices for the week.
Now, we don't have to spend a lot of time on Des Fitzpatrick out of Louisville because he jumped out on Saturday, 6 receptions for 90 yards, long of 29, but certainly a good game for the Cardinals product there. You got a quick thought on him?
Yeah, I tell you what, he's another one of those receivers who looked apart. Tall, lanky guy can go up and get the jump balls, can adjust his body control. I kind of put him in that same mode as Denzel Mims. So I know Denzel Mims didn't have the great rookie year that we was expecting because of injuries and because of the quarterback play with the New York Jets. But I can kind of see, Fitzpatrick being in that same Denzel Mims mode. I don't know if he gets drafted that high, but I tell you what, he's definitely going to make a team happy, whoever drafted him.
Another opt-out out of Wake Forest, Sage Surratt, wide receiver. What'd you think of his week at practice?
I tell you what, I was high on him coming into this week.
Great film.
Yeah. But one thing that I saw him struggle with is actually getting off the line of scrimmage. So I saw when, the corners out there was kind of impressed man and they were getting a little bit physical with him. It really seemed like he didn't have a go-to move to kind of get off the line of scrimmage. And they was kind of, keeping him in the dirt. And it was pretty much saying, they were sitting in his back pocket every move he was making. But he made a couple big plays in practice, but for the most part, he's going to have to work getting off the line of scrimmage or finding a move to get him off the line of scrimmage when he comes up against the physical corners out there.
Now, he did have one catch for 22 yards here, but my boy Frank Darby out of Arizona State, I think he had about 3 drops in the game as well. Did he practice a little better than he played?
He actually did practice better than what he
I
played.
like his game
And
overall.
He was definitely one of the most animated, characters, players out there. Just full of energy, big smile, dancing, kind of getting the team together. He did get nicked up in the game. But at the end of the day, coming from the East Coast, he's a Jersey guy. So I've been following.
Oh, that explains it.
I've been following Darby's career since high school, and him going out there to Arizona State under Herm Edwards. The narrative on Frank Darby is that he's just a one-dimensional receiver that can kind of take it over the top and catch the deep ball. But he actually showed in practice that he can run routes. But just like you said, he did have some concentration drops, so he's going to have to get on that jug machine if he wants to make that transition on the next level and be a productive receiver.
All right, that's the wide receiver group. Full report out of Mobile. We're getting down and dirty in these details, but we can because Rob was there in person scouting with his own 2 eyes. So why not? We should take advantage of that, right? Got to put in the work. Tight end, fullback. Quentin Morris out of Bowling Green, tight end on the American team. Kylan Granson, SMU tight end. Duke product Noah Gray was on the American as well, and Trey McKitty out of Georgia. On the national team, you had Ben Mason, who is a fullback / tight end. He played fullback in college, but they got him listed as both. We're seeing guys who play both in the NFL these days. I'm totally blanking on the guy's name in Baltimore, but he's 300-pound guy. He plays both in Baltimore. Why am I blanking on his name? Oh, it's gonna come to me. You know who I'm talking about, Rob?
I do know who you're talking about, but once again,
also blanking on the name.
Yep, you're not the only one that's blanking on that name.
All right, well, while I'm talking, can you Google that real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll finish up this point, but that's who Ben Mason. I think he's got potential to be like that. Hunter Long out of Boston College for the National as well. John Bates out of Boise State, and Kenny Yeboah out of Ole Miss, the Temple transfer. Now, Yeboah is someone, when I saw him transfer to Ole Miss, he's a long guy, good athlete, definitely going to be a factor at the next level. I think he could be a mid-round guy that could really help if he's a final piece to the puzzle on offense. I think he could stretch the middle of the field. I really like what I saw from him in his 1 year at Ole Miss. Definitely needs to be in a spread system, though. He's not as needs to work on his blocking a little bit, but his receiving game is very solid. Ben Mason, or as Michigan calls him, his Michigan friends call him, and his Twitter handle is Bench Mason because he's a bro and he's got a mohawk and he benches and he just runs people over. They talked about him, Rob, on the game. On his first play, they kind of highlighted him, and then he goes and completely pancakes his guy on his blocking assignment. It was the best call out of all time. Ben Mason, though, they say he's voted toughest player on the team for the last 2 years, which I don't know how much that's saying for Michigan, but I'm joking. But this guy just seems like an absolute animal that I would kill for my Jaguars to draft in the 6th or 7th round. I would love it.
Yeah, going back to that, the fullback is Patrick Ricard.
Ricard.
That was the name that was
Baltimore Ravens.
That was slipping both of our minds right there.
Yeah.
But out of this tight end group, I tell you what, Kenny Yeboah definitely stood out to me, and Bates. Those were the 2 tight ends throughout the week of practice that was making plays
Out of Boise.
Boise. Yeah, those were the 2 guys that kind of stood out to me, kind of winning their matchups, and just like you said, the tight ends, everyone kind of is going for that Darren Waller, that Travis Kelce, that George Kittle. Type tight end that can stretch the field of Mark Andrews. And I think we definitely had a group of guys who can kind of fit that mold, making that transition to the next level.
Yeah, Noah Gray out of Duke is certainly going to be a productive receiving tight end in the NFL if he gets with the right situation. He's got all the tools to really – he lines up in the slot sometimes too. I was blown away with Quentin Morris out of Bowling Green though in the game. How did he look in practice? Did he show out in the game? I had not heard much about him heading into the game.
Yeah, he looked the way that he looked in at the game. That's the way he looked at practice. And
Freaking athlete.
and I tell you what, a lot of these guys took advantage of this opportunity to come to the Senior Bowl, definitely knowing that it was not going to be a combine. So I think these guys came out with the mindset to actually come out here and work and actually compete and get better day in and day out. And that's what you saw for a lot of these guys, specifically the players in this tight end group.
All right. Well, that covers the tight end and fullback. We got to get Ben Mason makes it a fullback position, but interesting group of prospects for sure. Let's go on to the offensive line to wrap up the offensive side of the ball. Um, Offensive line talk doesn't make for the best podcast talk all all the time, so we will move quickly through it here. On the American, Carson Green, Texas A&M, Jack Anderson, Texas Tech, David Moore, Grambling State, Deontay Brown, Alabama, Deontay Smith, East Carolina, Dan Moore Jr., Texas A&M, Landon Dickerson out of Alabama, obviously towards ACL in the college football playoff semifinal, did not play. Alex Leatherwood, Alabama, Royce Newman, Ole Miss, Trey Smith out of Tennessee, Ben Cleveland out of Georgia, Drake Jackson out of Kentucky, and Ulrich Jackson out of Iowa. Rob, I know one of the guys you liked. First off, Deontay Brown, big fella at guard for Alabama. Looks like an absolute monster. Saw him a little susceptible to the pass rush, though. A quick step. What do you think of Deontay Brown out of Alabama?
Yeah, you're right. He's definitely a mauler. He in the running game, he's definitely going to get physical and he's definitely going to move some bodies. But to me, that was one thing that kind of jumped out in my mind. You know, just having that quick first step in pass protection, and he's going to struggle with that, especially against some elite pass rushers, and especially if a team goes to their NASCAR package where they're going to rush the quarterback. So he has to work on that. But for the most part, he had a solid week of practice. But one of the players that jumped off to me all week long was the offensive lineman out of Tennessee and Trey Smith.
Trey Smith, 5-star prospect, if I'm not mistaken, right? One of those 5 stars that Tennessee landed over the years. Solid career at Tennessee. Ended up, I believe he came in as a tackle and they moved him into guard during his career at Tennessee. Am I mistaken?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. But
I
me
so.
personally, I think he's going to play probably tackle on the next level. He's very capable of being a tackle on the next level.
Yeah, but good to see he's got some. He can kind of play both ways on that, so it's good. Versatility is always good along the offensive line. But I know the guy you want to talk about, Rob, is Deontay Smith out of East Carolina. What'd you like about his game?
Just complete game. Big physical offensive lineman. He actually, looked good in run protection, and run blocking, and actually looked good in pass protection. So he actually put everything together, and he was one of those guys who took advantage of the opportunity to come out here and compete. Smaller school name, but actually to come out here and compete and hold us on against some pretty good talent on the defense side of the ball. You tip your hats off to him.
And he stood out to Jeremiah as well on NFL.com. Jeremiah says Smith played in only one game this past fall due to injury, and scouts were lukewarm on his tape from 2019. So there's very little buzz about him coming into the out of the 2020 campaign. There will be plenty of chatter about him coming out of this week, though. Smith was phenomenal at tackle and guard. He has extremely long arms and knows how to use them. Let's go to the national squad, Rob. James Hudson at Cincinnati, Creed Humphrey, Oklahoma. How many left-handed centers do you see in football, Rob?
Not too many.
The lefty, just snapping those shotgun snaps, lefty, man. Brendan, I always call it Jameis, but they pronounce it a different way than broadcast. I'm used to, sorry, I live in Florida. I know Jameis Winston. I got to figure out how to pronounce that there out of Nebraska. Robert Jones, Middle Tennessee State. The superstar of the telecast, Quinn Minarez out of Wisconsin Whitewater. We'll get to him in a second. Another guy that Jeremiah liked was Robert Hainsey out of Notre Dame. Aaron Banks out of Notre Dame also played. Jalen Moore out of Western Michigan. Dylan Raduns out of North Dakota State, Spencer Brown of Northern Iowa, Jake Curhan out of Cal, and Adrian Ely out of Oklahoma. Sorry, man. The list of names, just run it all together on the page with my eyes, playing tricks here. All right, Hainsey from Jeremiah was one of the most consistent prospects this week. He played great with good hands and a firm base, taking snaps at guard and tackle. The team that picks him will get a very polished player. It didn't go unnoticed that Notre Dame guys worked out after practice every single day. And I was told Hainsey's interviews with teams were outstanding. Minorez out of Wisconsin Whitewater, also a Jeremiah guy. They highlighted him heavily on the broadcast, and I'll get to that in a second. Minorez was the most impressive player during the practices, Jeremiah said. From start to finish, he was a relative unknown coming into the week, hailing from a Division III school. Well, not only did he prove that he belonged, he showed everyone that he's one of the best players here. Minorez was dominant, displaying plenty of power and strength. No one should have any questions about his toughness either, as he reportedly played through a broken bone in his right hand on Thursday. He's going to be a quality starting interior lineman in the NFL. And I got to say, based on what I saw Saturday, I can't disagree with Daniel Jeremiah in that. Minorez is super entertaining. The background, he's got videos of he's talking up he was able to dunk after working out this past summer. They showed him working out. His parents own some kind of refinery up in Canada, and he works out in Canada by lifting logs in the woods. He was also pass protecting against a tree. I'm not sure how that helps your pass protect sets. He was working out against a tree. He's working on those quick hands, but not going to get a whole lot of work from a tree in a pass set, I imagine, Rob.
Yeah, but whatever he's doing, he needs to continue to do it. And Daniel Jeremiah is definitely right. He is definitely one of the players who came down here, who actually took advantage of the opportunity. Just like I've been saying, Nick, all along, with no draft, this opportunity was huge for some of these guys. And, this is just one case where, the player took advantage of it. And he was so dominant all week long in practice. Whether you was asking him to pass set, whether you was asking him to, run block, whatever the case may be, he was doing it, and he was doing it on an elite level. And he was actually getting physical and nasty with some of these defensive guys on the one-on-ones.
Yeah, absolutely good tape this week in practice. Has a couple reps in the game where he's just completely driving his man back from the ball. And I think, if that's a guy, he looks like he could be a second or third round pick to me based on what I'm seeing there. But we'll see, man. We'll see. He's got the size for sure. Man, you wonder how guys like that just fall through the cracks too. Just must not have played much in high school. We got to do a little background. That'd be a good podcast guest, by the way. That wraps up part 1 of our Senior Bowl series covering the offense. Be sure to check out part 2 tomorrow, where we'll dive deep into the defensive side of the ball. Thanks for listening. We'll send you out with our word from our sponsor, Coach Paint.
Thank you for listening to American Football Stories podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, American Football Stories. We are working to grow our network on YouTube, and we'll love to have you subscribe. You can find us also on Apple Podcasts, on Twitter, at American FB Story, and on our website, AmericanFootballStories.com. I am Robert Parker. My co-host is Nick Knudsen. This has been another episode of American Football Stories.